Hey everybody. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to finish the second of the two parts of the respiratory system, which is the lower respiratory system or the lower respiratory tract.
But first, let's do an overview of the lungs.
So this is a model here of the lungs, okay? Missing this part here, but this one will go over here like that. Okay. And notice that the right lung is going to have 3 lobes. Put that down for a second. I'm going to have 1, 2, and 3 lobes. And these 2 lobes are separated by a horizontal fissure, and these 2 lobes are separated by the oblique fissure. Okay.
Here on the left side,
you have 2 lobes, 1 and 2, separated by an oblique fissure. Okay. What we also can do with this is switch back around to this side. We have the pleura that's right on the lung itself is called the visceral pleura. So you can say this is the visceral pleura. Then we have a little space or cavity, which is the pleural cavity. And then we have on top of this diaphragm here, which definitely helps us in our breathing. We're going to have the parietal pleura. Okay, so that's pretty much the lungs here. Let me see if I can do one other thing here. Okay, here we have the Hillis. The Hillis is the opening immediately to the lungs, which allows the bronchi to go through. And notice that the bronchi, secondary bronchi, are the same numbers as the lobes. So we have on the right side 3 secondary bronchi, 3 lobes. 2 secondary bronchi, 2 lobes. Okay, so we have our Hillis that those secondary bronchi go through and eventually into the lungs. Okay, so that's pretty much an overview of the lungs.
lower respiratory tract overview.
Okay, so the lower respiratory system will begin here at the larynx, which is your voice box. Okay, larynx. From the larynx, you're going to go down to the trachea. So you can see a little bit better up here, larynx, trachea. Here you have the bronchi, primary, secondary, and tertiary. And from the bronchi, you're going to go into the bronchioles, namely the terminal bronchiole into the respiratory bronchiole, and eventually to the alveoli. So those are all the components that are going to be for the lower respiratory tract, and we're going to go over a little bit more in detail of each one.
Lower respiratory tract.
Okay, so here is the model of a larynx. Okay, larynx, which is our voice box. This is where the sound goes through. The wind goes through here. The air goes through there, and then eventually the larynx will have ligaments within it, which will allow you to have the different pitches for the different sounds. Okay, so now for the larynx, what we can do is that we can go over the different cartilages that make up the larynx. So there's going to be 3 singles and 3 pairs. Okay. Actually, let me go back to the other larynx model. Okay, so here we have this larynx model. Much better looking one here. Okay, in terms of the cartilage, you can see the cartilage really well. Okay, so our 3 single cartilages, what are they going to be? First of all this cartilage is hyaline cartilage, which is the second of the 3 strongest cartilages that we have in our body, except for the epiglottis, which is elastic cartilage, which is the weakest of the 3, but the most flexible. So let's start naming the 3 single cartilages. The first one's going to end up being the epiglottis, number 1. The second cartilage, single cartilage, will be the thyroid cartilage. Okay, here's the laryngeal prominence, also known as the Adam's apple. And then here we have the cricoid cartilage, which forms like a ring around the trachea. It goes all the way around. Notice in the front, it's very narrow, and in the back, the cricoid is very broad. Kind of looks like one of those rings, maybe a Super Bowl ring or something. very big on the top, and the bottom you see it very thin, kind of the same thing. So those are our 3 single cartilages. Then we have 3 paired cartilages. Our paired cartilages will be this little piece is kind of broken off here, but it sits on here like that. So these little tips right here, you can see the little line that goes across. That'll be a line of demarcation between the corniculate, it's kind of like a piece of corn or a horn, from the arytenoid. So corniculate, arytenoid. Okay. We also have one on this side, corniculate and arytenoid. So those are 2 pairs, 2 corniculates and 2 arytenoids. And then we got one more pair, which will complete our 9 cartilages, which will be the cuneiform, which I'll show you in a second here. Okay, so on this model here, we're going to be able to see the cuneiform. So the cuneiforms are here and here. Okay, see if I can, it's kind of faded out. It's this little bump right here, that's the cuneiform, that's cartilage, and the cuneiform on that side. Okay. So again, our 3 single cartilages, we can do it between, we can do it on this model here as well. We have the epiglottis, single, thyroid cartilage, and the cricoid cartilage. Our 3 paired cartilages are going to be the corniculate, arytenoid, which is underneath this muscle, and then the cuneiform. So those are our 9 cartilages, 3 paired and 3 single cartilages. Okay. So let's look inside the larynx a little bit more in detail. For that, I'm going to need to get another model. Okay, so we're back with this model here, and if we open up the larynx, again we have our thyroid, our cricoid. Okay. We have our corniculate, arytenoid, cuneiform. Okay, so if we open up this larynx, we'll look inside, we'll see a couple structures. Here, this little slit right here, that's called the glottis. And just above, that's going to be the false vocal cords, and the one below is going to be the true vocal cords. So false is this top lip, and the true will be this bottom lip. True vocal cords, false vocal cords, false vocal cords, true vocal cords, and then glottis. All right, so that's pretty much it for the larynx. All right, so from the larynx, we're going to go down the trachea, right back to this model. Okay, so this is our trachea. Let me put this together here. Okay, so here we have our trachea. Okay, these are the C-shaped rings. They don't go all the way around, so that's why they call C-shaped rings, made up of hyaline or tracheal rings. And inside the trachea, the type of epithelium, which is the longest epithelium I've ever had to memorize, is called ciliated, pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells. Okay, so basically what inside this trachea, which you can see up there too, here, this trachea is going to have that epithelium, and whenever there's any kind of debris that may go down to your trachea, then this cilia within the trachea will act like an escalator moving up that debris. And also there's going to be mucus in there, goblet cells that produce mucus, which will trap that bacteria, and along with the cilia will start elevating and elevating that debris out through your larynx, and then you just cough it out. All right. So now here you go from the trachea, and you end here at carina. It's kind of this bikini-shaped structure, carina, and that's the end of our trachea. Then we go into our bronchi. This is kind of like the legs of carina here. Primary bronchi. Bronchus means one. Bronchi means many, 2 or more. So this is the right primary bronchus, the left primary bronchus, or the primary bronchi. Then from the bronchi, primary bronchi, we go into the secondary bronchi. We're going to have 2 secondary bronchi on the left and 3 secondary bronchi on the right. Remember, the secondary bronchi are proportional to the amount of lobes on each lung. 3 secondary bronchi on the right, 3 lobes in your right lung. 2 secondary bronchi on the left, 2 lobes on your left lung. And then these color-coded structures will be the tertiary bronchi. Okay? All right. So with this model, we'll go next to the terminal bronchioles and respiratory bronchioles. We can look at this model, this little booklet here. Okay. You can see up here, you can see the primary bronchi, the secondary bronchi, the tertiary bronchi. Here we go to the bronchioles. Okay. The terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles. Okay, terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles. And then we go down here to the alveoli. Okay, and the alveoli are pretty cool little sac structures, which I'm going to show you a picture. I'm going to look for it. I'll be right back. All right, so you see here, look at what the alveoli look like in the inside.
You have type 1 alveolar cells, which are squamous cells that make up the alveolar wall and allow the diffusion of gases, of oxygen and carbon dioxide. You have alveolar type 2 cells, which release surfactant, and they prevent the alveoli from collapsing. And then you have alveolar macrophages that patrol the alveolar space. And here you can see some alveoli that look like a bunch of grapes. There's about 150 million alveoli per lung.
So I just want to show you this one diagram on the bottom, how the alveoli. And look, another cool thing here, you see the alveolar airspace inside here, and this is the capillary space. Here's the red blood cell, and there's a endothelium, and a gaseous change occurs between those two. So the red blood cell will drop off the carbon dioxide into the alveolar airspace. In exchange, the alveoli will drop off the oxygen into the red blood cell. So you can see the bunch of red blood vessels that are in between the alveoli. Okay, so here's a little chart. This is what the trachea looks like. This is the trachea, the mucosa, ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells. And this is the lungs. You see the smoker's lung here with all the black tar inside of it. Here you see the terminal bronchioles going to the respiratory bronchioles, to the alveolar ducts, to the alveolar sac, and to the individual alveolus. Where alveolus is singular, alveoli are many. Here on this side you can see the alveolar sac. You can see an individual alveoli with the type 1 cells and the type 2 cells. Type 1 cells make up the epithelium. Type 2 are surfactant cells, which make the alveoli nice and elastic. Then finally here you see a bunch of little dust cells that are inside the alveoli that help clean up inside the alveoli. Alright, so there was a lot of stuff there for the lower respiratory tract.
Lower respiratory tract recap.
Hopefully that will give you a better understanding of where the lower respiratory tract begins at the larynx, going down to the trachea, which helps clean up. Larynx, first of all, is the voice box. Get all your sound, singing, everything to your larynx. The air goes down to your trachea, which is a bunch of ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells. All that. That's going to help pick up that, with the mucus, it's going to help pick up all that debris and you can cough it out. Then the air is going to go down to the bronchi, primary, secondary, 3 on the right, secondary on the right, 2 secondary on the left, each proportional to the amount of lobes in each lung. Goes through the Hillis and then goes in eventually to the tertiary bronchi. Then it starts going down to the bronchioles, where there's really no cartilage around that anymore. And then from the bronchioles, the air will go into the alveoli. And the alveoli is going to have little alveolar macrophages that will help clean up that alveoli. And then the alveoli can dump off the oxygen to the red blood cell and in exchange pick up the carbon dioxide from the red blood cell. And then you breathe that air out. So that's pretty much it for the lower respiratory tract. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the lower respiratory tract. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. Alright, so make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye.